What would you do if your husband received a photo of you kissing his friend before you even returned from the holiday party? I never imagined that one carefully orchestrated moment would become the evidence that destroyed everything I'd built. The Riverside Medical Center's annual holiday party was exactly what I needed. After months of feeling invisible in my marriage to Jonas, tonight would remind everyone, including him, that I was still desirable, still worth attention. The upscale banquet room at Meridian Restaurant buzzed with conversations, clinking glasses, and the kind of energy that made me feel alive again. "Eve, you look absolutely stunning tonight," Dale Fisk said, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of champagne. His eyes lingered on my red dress, the one Jonas had barely glanced at when I'd asked for his opinion earlier. "Thank you, Dale. At least someone notices when I make an effort." I shot a pointed look toward Jonas, who stood near the appetizer table, methodically eating shrimp and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. My husband of 12 years, the man who used to make me feel like the only woman in the room, now treated social events like military operations, to be endured rather than enjoyed. Dale laughed, that easy charm that had drawn my attention over the past few months on full display. "Jonas doesn't know what he's got. If you were my wife—" "But I'm not," I interrupted with a smile that suggested otherwise might be interesting. This was the game we'd been playing for weeks now, ever since those coffee meetings had evolved from friendly conversation to something more charged. Dale worked in radiology at the same hospital where Jonas pulled night shifts in security, making him both forbidden and irresistible. The party was in full swing when I spotted the perfect opportunity. Jonas stood alone by the bar, checking his phone with that distant expression that had become his default setting. Meanwhile, Dale had positioned himself near the decorative holiday backdrop where several couples had been taking photos throughout the evening. "Jonas," I called out, my voice carrying across the room with practiced cheerfulness. "Come take a picture of Dale and me by the Christmas tree. The lighting is perfect over there." My husband looked up, his grey eyes unreadable as always. At 39, Jonas still carried himself with the rigid posture of his military days, even in his uncomfortable-looking suit. "Can't you ask someone else? I'm not good with cameras." "Please, you're my husband. I want you to take it." I made my voice just plaintive enough to draw attention from nearby conversations. Several colleagues turned to watch our interaction, and I could see the familiar flicker of social obligation cross Jonas's face. He hated being the center of attention, especially when it made him look uncooperative. Jonas sighed and walked over, accepting my phone with the resignation of a man who'd learned that resistance only prolonged these situations. "Fine. Where do you want to stand?" I positioned myself next to Dale, close enough that our shoulders touched. The silk of my dress caught the light beautifully, and I could feel the approving gazes of our audience. This was what I'd been missing, the sense of being seen, being envied, being the woman other people wished they could be. "Actually, Jonas, could you get us drinks first? Dale and I are both out, and I want to touch up my lipstick before the photo." I handed him our empty glasses, noting how his jaw tightened slightly. But he took them without argument, that ingrained politeness that made him so predictable. "What would you like?" he asked Dale, his tone carefully neutral. "Whatever Eve's having is fine," Dale replied, and I caught the subtle smirk he tried to hide. We both knew what was about to happen. As Jonas walked toward the bar, I quickly reapplied my lipstick using my phone's camera. "Ready for our close-up?" I murmured to Dale. "Are you sure about this, Eve? He's going to see—" "That's the point. I'm tired of being invisible. If he won't pay attention to me, maybe this will wake him up." The plan was perfect in its simplicity. Jonas would return, take our photo, and finally realize what he was in danger of losing. A little jealousy might be exactly what our marriage needed. Dale positioned himself behind me, his hands resting lightly on my waist. "Like this?" "Perfect." I leaned back against him, feeling the solid warmth of his chest. Around us, the party continued, but I felt like we were in our own spotlight. This was the moment I'd been building toward for months, the moment Jonas would finally see me as something more than the reliable wife who managed his schedule and raised his daughter. When Jonas returned with our drinks, I was ready. Okay, now the photo. Make sure you get the Christmas tree in the background. It's so festive. Jonas raised my phone, squinting at the screen with the concentration of someone who genuinely struggled with technology. How's this angle? Perfect. Dale, put your arm around me properly. We want this to look good. I tilted my head toward Dale's shoulder, my smile bright and natural. This was the image I wanted captured, me looking radiant and desired, with a man who appreciated what he was holding. Jonas took several shots, his expression unreadable behind the phone. Got it. These look fine. But as he handed back my phone, Dale made his move. Instead of stepping away, he turned me toward him, his hands cupping my face with surprising boldness. One more for good luck? Before I could respond, his lips were on mine. Not the quick peck I'd been expecting, but a real kiss, soft, warm, and lasting long enough to make a statement. I melted into it for just a moment, caught up in the thrill of being wanted, of being the kind of woman men fought over. When we broke apart, I was breathless and exhilarated. The kiss had been perfect, passionate enough to prove Dale's interest, public enough to make Jonas take notice, but brief enough to maintain some deniability. I turned back toward my husband, ready to gauge his reaction, to see if I'd finally broken through that infuriating calm of his. But Jonas wasn't looking at us. He was looking at his phone, his face completely expressionless. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the party noise that suddenly seemed very far away. Jonas? I tried to inject the right note of casual confusion into my voice. Everything okay? He looked up at me, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker in his grey eyes, something that made my stomach drop. Then his expression smoothed back into that familiar neutrality. I just received a text, he said quietly, holding up his phone so I could see the screen. Someone sent me a very interesting photo. My blood turned to ice. On his screen was a picture of Dale and me, taken from a different angle than where Jonas had been standing. In it, Dale was pulling me into that kiss, and I was clearly responding, my body language unmistakably willing. The timestamp showed it had been taken just moments ago. I think I'm going to head home, Jonas continued, his voice perfectly calm. Eve, you can catch a ride with someone else, can't you? I'm sure Dale would be happy to help. He pocketed his phone and walked away, leaving me standing there in my red dress, suddenly feeling exposed under the party lights. Around us, conversations had quieted, and I could feel the weight of curious stares. Eve, Dale whispered urgently, who took that picture? How did they get Jonas's number? But I couldn't answer. I was too busy watching my husband's retreating figure, realizing that my perfect plan had just become something else entirely. Something that felt less like taking control and more like losing it completely. The party continued around us, but the magic was gone. I'd gotten exactly what I'd wanted, Jonas's attention. I just hadn't expected it to feel like this. The drive home felt endless. Carmen, my sister, had offered to give me a ride after Jonas left, but her attempts at conversation fell flat against my growing anxiety. The image on Jonas's phone kept replaying in my mind, not just what it showed, but what it meant. Someone had been watching us, waiting for exactly that moment. He's just being dramatic, Carmen said as she pulled into our driveway. Men hate it when they think they're losing control. Give him a day or two to cool off, then remind him what he's got to lose. I nodded absently, but my confidence was shaking. In 12 years of marriage, I'd never seen Jonas react to anything with complete silence. Even during our worst fights, he'd engage, argue back, show some emotion. This cold withdrawal was new territory. The house was dark except for the porch light. Jonas's truck sat in the driveway, but when I went inside, he was nowhere to be found. His work clothes were gone from the bedroom, which meant he'd changed and left again. Probably went to the hospital early for his night shift, I told myself. Running away to his comfort zone. I changed out of my red dress, hanging it carefully in the closet. In the bathroom mirror, my lipstick was smudged from Dale's kiss, and I felt a flutter of the excitement I'd experienced at the party. Whatever Jonas was feeling, at least I'd proven I was still desirable. Maybe this shock would be good for us. My phone buzzed with a text from Dale. "Are you okay? Jonas seemed really upset. Should we talk?" I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to call him, to dissect every moment of the evening, to plan our next move. But another part, the part that had seen something dangerous in Jonas's eyes, warned me to be careful. "I'm fine," I typed back. "Let's give it a day or two. He'll come around." But Jonas didn't come around. When I woke up the next morning, his side of the bed was untouched. His overnight bag was gone from the closet, along with several changes of clothes. A note on the kitchen counter, written in his precise handwriting, simply said, "Staying at my parents' for a few days. Need some space to think." I crumpled the note, irritation flaring. This was exactly like Jonas, to retreat instead of fighting for what we had. Any other husband would have confronted Dale, demanded explanations, shown some passion. Instead, he was hiding at his parents' house like a wounded animal. When 7-year-old Mira came down for breakfast, her dark eyes, so much like her father's, scanned the kitchen with the awareness kids develop when their world becomes unstable. "Where's Daddy?" "He had to work early," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. "He'll be back soon." But Mira wasn't buying it. She picked at her cereal, glancing toward the door every few minutes. Kids always knew when the adults were lying. I tried calling Jonas around noon, but it went straight to voicemail. His mother, Laya, answered when I called their house, her voice coolly polite in a way that told me Jonas had shared at least some version of events. "He's sleeping, Eve. He worked a double shift last night. I'll tell him you called." "Lila, this is ridiculous. We had a small disagreement at a party. Married couples work through these things." "I'm sure they do," she replied, but her tone suggested she wasn't sure about us specifically. "I'll give him the message." The day dragged on. I tried to work from home, but concentration was impossible. Every few minutes I found myself checking my phone, expecting Jonas to call with an apology, or Dale to text with reassurance, or someone to contact me with an explanation for that mysterious photo. Instead, the silence stretched. Even social media felt strange. Several people from the party had posted pictures, but none included me and Dale. It was as if our moment had been carefully edited out of the official record, existing only in that one damning image someone had sent to my husband. By evening, my anxiety had transformed into anger. Jonas was being childish, punishing me for one moment of spontaneity. Yes, I'd kissed Dale, but it wasn't like we'd disappeared into a hotel room. It was a party kiss, meaningless in the grand scheme of our marriage. If Jonas was too insecure to handle his wife being attractive to other men, that was his problem to solve. I called Dale, needing to hear a voice that didn't judge me. "Eve, I've been worried about you all day. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine. Jonas is being dramatic, staying at his parents' like a teenager. I just need to figure out how to handle this without making him feel completely emasculated." "About that photo," Dale said, his voice uncertain. "I've been thinking about who might have taken it. There were a lot of people at the party, but most of them know both you and Jonas. Why would someone send it to him like that?" It was a good question, one that had been nagging at me all day. The timing had been too perfect, too immediate. Someone had been watching us, waiting for exactly that moment, with Jonas's phone number ready to go. "Maybe it was just someone trying to be helpful," I said, not believing it myself. "Or maybe they thought it was funny." "Maybe," Dale agreed, but he didn't sound convinced either. We talked for another 20 minutes, analyzing every detail of the party, trying to identify potential photographers. But the conversation felt different than our usual flirtatious exchanges. The kiss had changed something between us, made everything more real and more complicated. After hanging up, I tried Jonas again. This time, he answered on the third ring. "What do you want, Eve?" His voice was flat, emotionless, and somehow that was worse than anger would have been. "I want to talk to my husband. I want you to come home so we can work through this like adults." "Work through what exactly? The part where you orchestrated a public humiliation, or the part where you've been lying to me for months?" "I haven't been lying." "Really?" "Because I've had an interesting day, Eve. Very educational. Did you know the hospital keeps detailed logs of employee badge access? Dale's been taking a lot of lunch breaks that coincide with your errands around town." My stomach dropped. Jonas's security background had always been theoretical to me, something from his past that occasionally surfaced in his careful way of checking locks, or his habit of noting exit routes. I'd never considered how those skills might apply to our marriage. "Jonas, you're being paranoid. Dale and I are friends. We've had coffee a few times, nothing more." "Friends," he repeated, and I could hear something shifting in his tone. "Is that what you call it when you delete calendar entries and pay cash for meals so there's no paper trail?" The phone felt slippery in my suddenly sweaty palm. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Your cloud backup automatically syncs, Eve. Even deleted entries leave traces if you know where to look. 8 meetings in 6 weeks, all scheduled around Dale's shift patterns. Very thorough planning for nothing more." I closed my eyes, trying to think. How much did he actually know, and how much was he guessing? Jonas had always been methodical, but this level of investigation suggested he'd been suspicious longer than I'd realized. "Even if we did meet for coffee, that's not a crime. I'm allowed to have friends." "You're right," Jonas said, and for a moment I felt relief. "You're allowed to have friends. What you're not allowed to do is lie to me about it, plan secret meetings, and then humiliate me in public to cover your tracks." "It wasn't planned. The photo says otherwise. You positioned us perfectly, sent me away at exactly the right moment, and gave Dale his cue. The only thing you didn't plan for was someone else with a camera." The line went quiet, and I could hear voices in the background, his parents probably, offering support I wasn't getting from anyone. "Jonas, please come home. We can work through this. Every marriage has rough patches." "Some rough patches, yes, but most marriages don't involve one spouse systematically deceiving the other while planning public betrayals. I need more time to think." "How much time?" "I don't know yet, but Eve, stop calling Dale, stop deleting your digital footprints, and stop pretending this was some innocent mistake. We both know better." He hung up, leaving me alone in our too-quiet house, finally understanding that my perfect plan had been nothing of the sort. Jonas wasn't reacting like a jealous husband who needed to be managed. He was reacting like someone who'd been gathering evidence, and I had no idea how much evidence he actually had. Monday morning brought the kind of grey December weather that matched my mood perfectly. Jonas still hadn't come home, and my attempts to reach him were going straight to voicemail. I'd spent the weekend alternating between anger and anxiety, trying to figure out my next move. Work provided a welcome distraction. At Hartwell and Associates, my mid-level HR position kept me busy with year-end reviews and holiday scheduling. The routine felt normal, grounding, a reminder that I was competent and respected in at least one area of my life. I was reviewing employee files when my desk phone rang. "Eve Thallis, Human Resources." "Eve, it's Dale. I'm calling from the hospital. We need to talk." Something in his voice made my stomach clench. "What's wrong?" "Not over the phone. Can you meet me for lunch? The usual place?" Our usual place was a small cafe downtown, far enough from both our workplaces to avoid accidental encounters with colleagues. We'd met there 6 times over the past 2 months, conversations that had gradually shifted from friendly to intimate, building the foundation for what happened at the party. "Dale, maybe we should lay low for a few days. Until Jonas calms down. That's what I need to talk to you about. Jonas isn't calming down. He's doing something else entirely, and you need to know about it. An hour later, I sat across from Dale in our familiar corner booth, watching him fidget with his coffee cup. He looked terrible, pale, with dark circles under his eyes, and the kind of nervous energy that suggested he hadn't slept. He came to see me yesterday, Dale said without preamble. Jonas, at the hospital. What did he want? To talk, just talk. But Eve, it wasn't what I expected. He wasn't angry or threatening or any of the things I thought he'd be. He was calm, professional, like he was conducting an interview. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December air. What kind of questions? About us, about how long we'd been meeting, who initiated contact, what we'd discussed. He already knew most of the answers, Eve. He was just confirming details. You didn't tell him anything, did you? Dale's silence was answer enough. Dale, what did you say? He had printouts, Eve. Bank records showing your cash withdrawals on the days we met. Cafe receipts with timestamps. Your calendar entries that you thought you'd deleted. He laid it all out like a prosecutor presenting evidence. My hands were shaking now. That's impossible. I deleted those entries. I was careful. Apparently not careful enough. He explained about cloud backups, automatic syncing, digital footprints, things I never thought about. Dale leaned forward, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. But that's not the worst part. He had the party footage, Eve. Security cameras from 3 different angles. What footage? The restaurant has a full surveillance system. Jonas used his hospital credentials to request access, professional courtesy between security departments. He showed me 15 minutes of video, starting from when you asked him to take our picture. I felt the walls of the cafe pressing in on me. What did it show? Everything. You positioning me by the backdrop, sending Jonas for drinks, touching up your makeup while watching to make sure he was gone. Then me kissing you, and you kissing me back. But here's what I didn't know. The cameras caught you signaling me. A little nod right before I made my move. The coffee in my mouth turned bitter. I had nodded, hadn't I? A tiny gesture to let Dale know the moment was right, that Jonas was far enough away, that our audience was properly positioned. At the time, it had felt natural, instinctive. On camera, it would look calculated. Dale, you have to understand. I do understand. That's the problem. Jonas asked me who planned it, who suggested the party as the right moment, who came up with the idea of the photo. And I told him the truth, Eve. I told him it was all you. The betrayal hit me like cold water. You threw me under the bus. I panicked. He had evidence of everything. Our coffee meetings, the texts, even hotel records. Hotel records? Dale's face flushed red. The boutique inn downtown, where we went after our last coffee date. You used your maiden name, but they have security footage of us arriving together. In your car, the one you told Jonas was in the shop that day. I closed my eyes, trying to process the scope of Jonas's investigation. Every lie, every careful deception, every moment I'd thought was secret, he'd found it all. What else did you tell him? Everything. The text where you said you were testing him, seeing if he'd finally show some jealousy. The photos you sent me. The plans we made for after you left him. Dale's voice cracked. Eve, he recorded our conversation. He has it all on tape now. He can't do that. It's illegal to record someone without consent. Not in this state if one party consents. And I consented, Eve. After he showed me the evidence, after I realized how deep this went, I signed a statement. I gave him everything he asked for. I stared at Dale. This man I'd thought was charming and bold, seeing him clearly for the first time. When faced with consequences, he'd crumbled completely, sacrificing me to save himself. You're pathetic, I said, standing up from the booth. I thought you were different, but you're just another weak man who can't handle a strong woman. Eve, wait. There's more. I turned back, dreading what else he might reveal. He's filed for divorce. The papers were served at my house this morning. June's named as a witness. She heard you at the party, talking about managing Jonas for the best camera angle. And there's something else. Something about emergency custody. The cafe spun around me. Emergency custody meant meant Jonas was trying to take my daughter away based on his collection of evidence and Dale's cowardly confession. I have to go, I managed, grabbing my purse with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Eve, I'm sorry, I never meant for it to go this far. But I was already walking away, leaving Dale alone with his guilt and his empty promises. Outside, the grey December day felt appropriate for the first time in my life. Everything I'd built, everything I'd carefully constructed, was falling apart. And Jonas, my quiet, methodical husband, was the one tearing it down. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp winter clarity that made everything seem sharper, more defined. I'd spent Monday evening trying to reach Jonas, calling his parents' house repeatedly, until his father finally answered and told me, in his quiet but firm voice, that Jonas didn't want to speak with me. Paul, this is getting out of hand. We're married. We have a daughter together. Surely we can work through this like adults. Eve, I've known you for 12 years. I've watched you manipulate situations, twist conversations, and make Jonas doubt his own perceptions. But this time, he has evidence. This time, he's not backing down. The certainty in his voice shook me more than Jonas's silence had. Paul Thallis was a man of few words, someone who stayed out of family drama. If he was taking sides, the situation was worse than I'd imagined. I arrived at work early, hoping to lose myself in the familiar routine of employee evaluations and benefit enrollment. The Hartwell and Associates building was a sleek downtown high-rise, all glass and steel, designed to impress clients and intimidate competitors. I'd always loved walking through the marble lobby, feeling important and professional in my tailored suits and designer heels. But today, something felt different. The security guard's nod seemed less friendly. The elevator ride more awkward. I told myself it was paranoia, that my personal problems were making me hypersensitive to imaginary slights. I was wrong. Around 10:30, I was reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant, Michelle, knocked on my office door. Her expression was carefully neutral, the kind of professional mask we all wore when delivering uncomfortable news. Eve, there's someone here to see you, in the main lobby. Who is it? I don't have any appointments scheduled. He said he's a process server. He asked me to tell you it's regarding Thallis versus Thallis. The words hit me like a physical blow. Jonas was having me served with divorce papers at my workplace, in front of my colleagues, in the building where I'd worked to build my professional reputation for 8 years. Tell him I'm in a meeting, that I'm not available. Michelle shifted uncomfortably. He said he'd wait, and Eve. There are clients in the lobby for the 10:45 presentation. The partners are already down there. Of course, Tuesday morning was our weekly client presentation, when potential customers toured our offices and met with senior staff. The lobby would be full of witnesses, including the executives who determine promotions and salary increases. Fine, tell him I'll be down in 5 minutes. I used those 5 minutes to check my appearance, to practice the kind of calm, professional demeanor that had served me well in difficult situations. Whatever Jonas thought he was accomplishing, I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a public breakdown. But when I stepped off the elevator into the marble lobby, I realized how thoroughly he'd outmaneuvered me. The space was indeed full of people. 3 potential clients in expensive suits, 2 of our partners, several junior associates, and a handful of administrative staff. At the center of it all stood a man in his 50s, holding a manila envelope, clearly waiting for me. Eve Thallis? Yes. You've been served. He handed me the envelope with the kind of professional courtesy that somehow made the moment even more humiliating. Every conversation in the lobby stopped. Every eye turned toward us, watching as I accepted the papers that would make my personal disaster a matter of public record. I tried to maintain my composure, to treat it like any other business transaction. But my hands were shaking as I took the envelope, and my voice cracked when I said, "Thank you." The process server nodded and walked away, leaving me standing in the center of our glass-walled lobby, holding the evidence of my marriage's destruction, while my colleagues and clients watched in fascinated silence. I should have walked back to the elevator immediately, should have retreated to my office to process this privately. Instead, I made the mistake of opening the envelope right there in front of everyone. The papers were extensive, not just a simple divorce filing, but a comprehensive legal document that detailed adultery, fraud, and a request for emergency custody of Mira. As I scanned the pages, I could see Jonas's methodical approach in every paragraph. Bank records, witness statements, photographic evidence, digital forensics, all of it organized and presented with the precision of someone who understood how to build an unassailable case. But it was the final page that broke me, a statement from Dale, signed and notarized, describing our affair in clinical detail. Every coffee meeting, every intimate conversation, every moment I'd thought was private, all of it reduced to legal language and presented as evidence of my betrayal. The lobby began to spin around me. The marble floor felt unsteady beneath my feet. I could hear whispers starting, could feel the weight of professional judgment settling over me like a heavy blanket. Eve, one of the partners, Richard Hartwell himself, stepped forward with concern. "Are you all right?" I tried to answer, tried to summon the kind of professional explanation that might salvage some dignity from the situation. Instead, what came out was a broken sob that echoed off the glass walls and marble surfaces. I need to, but I couldn't finish the sentence. The words wouldn't come, and the tears I'd been holding back for days finally spilled over. I ran for the elevator, clutching the divorce papers against my chest, aware that every step was being observed and judged. Behind me, I could hear Richard making apologies to the clients, could hear Michelle explaining that there was a personal emergency, could hear the whispered conversations that would follow me for however long I remained at this company. In the elevator, alone for 30 seconds, I tried to pull myself together. But when the doors opened on my floor, I could see that the news had already traveled. Colleagues were pretending to work while obviously discussing what had just happened. Phone calls were being made, emails sent, the gossip network that existed in every office, already spreading the story of my public humiliation. I made it to my office and closed the door, but the glass walls that had always made me feel important now felt like a fishbowl. Everyone could see me, could watch as I sat at my desk trying to process the scope of Jonas's legal assault. My phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. "Heard what happened. Jonas is being a vindictive ass. Don't let him intimidate you." But as I read through the divorce papers more carefully, I realized this wasn't intimidation. This was warfare, conducted with the kind of strategic planning that my quiet, methodical husband had learned in his military days. Every piece of evidence was documented, every witness statement corroborated, every legal argument supported by facts I couldn't dispute. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a terrible thought began to form. Jonas hadn't been surprised by that photo at the party. He'd been waiting for it, gathering evidence, building his case while I thought I was being clever. The hunter had become the hunted, and I'd never even realized the game had changed. The rest of Tuesday passed in a blur of whispered conversations and sympathetic glances that felt more like pity than support. I tried to work, to focus on the quarterly reports that suddenly seemed meaningless, but every few minutes someone would find an excuse to walk past my office and peer through the glass walls. By 5 o'clock, I couldn't stand it anymore. I gathered my things and headed home, hoping to find some sanctuary in familiar surroundings. Instead, I found Lila's car in my driveway and my mother-in-law sitting at my kitchen table with Mira, helping her with homework. "Eve," Lila said without looking up, We need to talk. Mira glanced between us with the kind of nervous awareness that children develop when their world becomes unstable. Mommy, where's Daddy? Grandma Lila says he's working, but his clothes are gone from your room. I knelt down beside my daughter, trying to project calm I didn't feel. Daddy and I are having some grown-up problems, sweetheart, but we both love you very much, and that's never going to change. Are you getting divorced like Emma's parents? The directness of 7-year-old logic cut through all my careful euphemisms. We're trying to work things out. Lila stood up, her expression making it clear that she had different information. Mira, why don't you go watch TV in the living room? Your mom and I need to have an adult conversation. After Mira left, Lila turned to face me with the kind of controlled anger that was somehow more intimidating than shouting would have been. 12 years, she said quietly. 12 years I've watched you chip away at my son's confidence, make him doubt his instincts, convince him that his concerns were paranoia. But he's not paranoid, is he, Eve? Lila, I know you're upset. Upset? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm furious, but I'm also impressed, in a sick way. The level of deception you've maintained, the systematic lying, the careful manipulation, it's almost artistic. I sat down heavily in one of my own kitchen chairs, feeling like a stranger in my own house. It wasn't like that. Things with Jonas had been difficult for months. We were growing apart, and Dale was just what? A test. A way to see if you could push Jonas far enough to finally react. Because that's what he told the attorney, Eve, that you called it a test. The walls felt like they were closing in. Jonas is taking this too far. One mistake, one moment of poor judgment, and he's trying to destroy my entire life. One mistake. Lila pulled out her phone and began scrolling through what looked like a lengthy document. Let me read you some highlights from Dale's statement. Eve initiated all contact, suggesting coffee meetings during my lunch breaks. She said her marriage was boring and that Jonas never paid attention to her. She sent explicit photos and suggested we meet at the boutique inn. Should I continue? Each word felt like a physical blow. Dale hadn't just confessed to the affair. He'd provided a detailed timeline that made me look like a predator who had systematically seduced him. He's lying to save himself. Is he? Because Jonas has the hotel records, Eve. Security footage of you arriving together. Credit card receipts for a room booked under your maiden name. Text messages that you thought you'd deleted but that were backed up to the cloud. I closed my eyes, trying to think of some explanation, some way to reframe the evidence. But Jonas had been thorough, collecting not just proof of the affair, but documentation of the deception that surrounded it. Even if all of that's true, it doesn't justify what he's doing now, serving me at work, trying to take Mira away, turning my own family against me. Your own family? Lila's voice rose slightly. Eve, you humiliated him in public, in front of people he works with, people who respect him. You orchestrated that kiss at the party specifically to hurt him, to prove that you could manipulate him into taking a picture of his own betrayal. And you're surprised that he's fighting back? The kitchen felt too small, too warm. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the suburban street where Mira had learned to ride her bike, where Jonas had spent weekends working in the garden, where we'd built what I thought was a stable life. He's not the man I married, I said finally. The Jonas I married would have fought for me, would have tried to win me back instead of hiring lawyers and collecting evidence. No, Eve. The Jonas you married was young and insecure and convinced that he was lucky to have you. You've spent 12 years training him not to trust his instincts, not to question your explanations, not to believe his own eyes. But people change, and sometimes they remember who they used to be before someone spent over a decade tearing them down. Behind us, the front door opened and closed. Jonas walked into the kitchen, still wearing his hospital security uniform, looking tired but determined. He nodded to his mother, then looked at me with those grey eyes that had once made me feel like the most important person in the world. Eve, I came to pick up Mira for dinner. The court order gives me temporary custody during the investigation. What investigation? Jonas pulled out an official-looking document. Child Services is reviewing the stability of Mira's home environment. Given the evidence of deception, financial irregularities, and the public nature of the adultery, they want to ensure she's in a safe situation. I would never hurt Mira. She's my daughter. She's our daughter, and she's been living in a house full of lies for months while you conducted an affair and planned to leave her father. The court wants to make sure she's protected while we sort this out. Mira appeared in the kitchen doorway, her backpack already on her shoulders. "Daddy, are you coming home now?" Jonas knelt down and hugged her, his composure cracking slightly. "Not tonight, sweetheart, but you're going to come stay with Grandma and Grandpa for a few days. We'll have fun." "What about Mommy?" "Mommy will visit you very soon, but right now, the grown-ups need to work some things out." As I watched Jonas lead my daughter out of the house, I realized that my perfect plan had become a perfect disaster. Every move I'd made to gain control had actually given Jonas more evidence, more ammunition, more justification for the systematic destruction of everything I'd thought was mine. The house felt empty after they left, filled with the kind of silence that comes when you finally understand how completely you've miscalculated. Jonas wasn't the weak, predictable man I'd married. He was someone else entirely, someone who had been watching, learning, and preparing for this moment far longer than I'd realized. And I was completely alone. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of legal meetings, court appearances, and the gradual realization that Jonas had outplayed me at every turn. My attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Vance, had been blunt about my prospects from our first meeting. "Eve, I've seen a lot of divorce cases, but this level of documentation is unusual. Your husband has built a case that would be difficult to challenge even if the evidence wasn't so comprehensive." We were sitting in her downtown office, a wall of law books behind her, and the divorce papers spread across the conference table like evidence at a crime scene. Every page represented another nail in the coffin of my marriage, another piece of proof that I was exactly what Jonas claimed I was. There has to be something we can do, some way to challenge his evidence or question his methods. Patricia shook her head. "The surveillance is legitimate, Dale's confession voluntary, digital evidence from your devices, financial records undeniable, $11,000 transferred to your secret account, holiday funds diverted for your affair and exit plan. Premeditation, not impulse. Custody? Months of deception, financial fraud, emotional manipulation, public humiliation at the party. Witnesses heard your calculated jokes about managing Jonas. The court sees cruelty. Options: accept Jonas's generous settlement, primary custody to him, the house, most assets. I get supervised weekend visits, modest funds, repay the $11,000. Fighting meant public trial. Every text, receipt, detail exposed. Mira would learn it all eventually. I accepted. Final hearing. Grey January morning. Jonas calm, composed. Judge approved terms swiftly. 12 years dissolved in minutes. Outside, Jonas paused. "I never meant for it to go this far," I said. "Yes, you did," he replied quietly. "You planned every step. You just didn't plan on getting caught." He walked away toward his truck, toward the life he'd rebuilt with dignity. Mira, the house, respect intact. I stood alone on the steps, decree in hand, grasping the true cost. I'd chased desire, control, validation. Instead, I lost my family, reputation, self. Jonas hadn't sought cruel revenge. He'd delivered justice, quiet, methodical, irrefutable. And justice, I learned, offered no defense,